All right, so this is the APAC session for the staff engineers path. And today we're diving into the first chapter, and we'll also cover the forward and intro if there's any additional notes there. I added a few notes to kind of kick things off, but please do add anything you're interested in to the agenda, and we'll kind of work through mine and get to everyone else. So the first few I added were specific to the forward and intro. So there was, on the topic of management versus IC paths, where there was this quote: if you could really see 5 years ahead in both paths, you'd find that they have a lot in common, but at the start they look quite different. And I have to admit, so I've talked to quite a few staff plus folks, and the more that I talk to them, the more I'm hearing like, oh yeah, I at some point was a manager too, and then I'm now a staff or someone beyond, and like they've even swung back and forth a few times. And I know there's an article somewhere about like the pendulum of manager and staff kind of engineer, but I'm curious. I don't know if we have any staff or engineers or managers here, but if we do, curious what people think of this idea of that they really do have a lot of overlap and a lot in common, but just maybe not so much like at the very beginning.
I guess I'm the only one at that level here, so I'll speak up on this, and I do have some background that actually is helpful as well. So for some context, in my previous role before joining GitLab, I was a senior product manager at a edutech company. And I think that it's kind of like a staff plus role as well, in the sense that you do have to work cross-functionally and you do have to do a lot of this big picture thinking and also diving down into the weeds just to get things and people motivated and moving along. The first time I assumed a manager role at GitLab, I started here as an IC as well. It actually struck me that a lot of the skill sets and tools that I was relying on to kind of get work done as a manager was actually the exact same things that I did as a product manager. So if you ask me, it does feel a lot like the skill sets and the things you kind of do as a manager, it does have a very big overlap with the skill sets that you will have as a staff plus contributor. I think the only difference is that the focus is very different. As a people manager, my main focus is in managing people and making sure that we are adequately resourced to actually do the work that we need to do. As a product manager, it was a bit different. I was actually very focused on trying to get people together to do things that were important. And in some cases, to unstick specific product challenges. So it does feel like actually, it's not so much that the roles are fluid. I think there's a huge amount of overlap in skill set. And I think that enables you to kind of step into either role, either an IC at a staff plus role or a manager plus role, depending on, I guess, the focus that you want to have at any point in time. At least that's how I see it.
Just to add on that, so that sounds like one of the archetypes that is covered. I think it's a product team lead or tech lead or something. Yeah, tech lead.
Nice. Awesome. Any other thoughts from anyone on that one? Cool, thanks for sharing that. So the other one that I noted here from the intro was they kind of laid out, I think, what we were going to work through in the book, that there's these 3 pillars of staff engineering, which are big picture thinking, execution of projects, and then leveling up engineers that you work with. And so, I mean, it seems like a pretty good list, but I'm curious if you agree with this list and like how you see it in comparison to what we see at GitLab with staff engineers, or if there's other things that should be on the list or on that list that maybe that aren't listed. I thought it was pretty much covered it. I think certain people have certain specialties that fit in one category more than another, but thought it was an interesting like set of categories, I guess.
I think that for me, the big picture thinking is it's something I see in common with most of the Stuff Plus engineers. They're always thinking of like, okay, what's a bigger, how can we make this work for everybody in a cross-functional way? Just looking at the behaviors on what I see on niches and MRs. And I think ultimately the leveling up of other engineers, I think that sort of happens by just working with them. I feel that way. Like I learn so much whenever I interact with some of those people.
Yeah, I agree. I think the leveling up is a really interesting topic, because I think like there's like that passive approach of like, if you're just exposed to staff engineers, you learn a lot, but then there's some people that like take a more active role in mentoring and kind of teaching. And it's really interesting to me, the whole like educational aspect almost.
I think the only thing I was wondering, and maybe might just ask around some other staff engineers to see what their opinion. Can anyone hear me? I realize my mic's not plugged in. Oh, cool. I was wondering if maybe the big picture thinking is actually more project focused usually in GitLab. I'm not sure. That's kind of the experience I've seen coming across other staff engineers. So it's in the context of a specific project. But I guess it'd be interesting to see maybe examples of staff engineers that work on big picture thinking outside of, say, more specific project contexts.
I think there are also some examples that I've seen in the company where certain staff engineers are very focused into one particular technology and they are like specialists in that area. Yeah, so it seems like these are two different possibilities that one could take.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's like some people that are like super visible in the discussions they have about different topics, and then certain staff engineers that are really like just like diving deep into some like technical details. And I mean, it's nice that we have that variety. Cool.
I mean, I feel like that's the whole, I was about to say that I feel like that's the whole point, right? Like, I think once you become a senior, like, okay, the path's pretty clear. Beyond that, everybody specializes different things, like different requirements of the company. And I think that's the whole point why this is a big topic in itself, right? It's the ambiguity of it. That's hard, I guess.
One of the things I discovered with I wrote a blog post like 3 years ago on this, and I interviewed lots of staff engineers, all the staff engineers we had at the time, actually, which is not that many. But the thing that struck me was the ability to find the way that you can best apply your skill set, and that is particular to you. And so you have the responsibility to find, and the freedom to find the thing that you can, the impact that you can best have. And so I think it's less prescriptive because the responsibility is more on you to find your fit and find your impact, more than a senior engineer where it's quite a bit more prescriptive.
So having said that, then does that mean that so first that a staff engineer needs to know how to define their own scope in the organization, and then the other thing is that it needs to align also with what the company needs at that point of time, so that that match can happen?
I think that when you are running up to staff, you have to sort of show that you have business acumen and an awareness of the wider organization, and a way to jump into a problem that you don't have a lot of familiarity with, that is sort of cross team, so you can show your impact can be bigger. I don't know if you have to in order to be staff, but I think that ideally staff engineers can do that. So if you can show that you can do that, or at least you have wider awareness of the organization, the business goals, as well as how that is a technical challenge as well, like sort of meeting the technical and the business side. I think that's where the leadership really comes in, is it's not just technical, it's also from the business side of it as well. But not from a product perspective. It's like, yeah, there's an impact also in the business.
All right, should we jump into some of these chapter 1 items? Cool. So the first one I had here is, I feel like this kind of just set the stage for the book, was staff engineering is a leadership role. And I mean, I think this is a true statement. I wasn't really surprised to see this, I don't think, but I was curious if anyone had any thoughts about this in particular that they wanted to share or get into.
I find that, yes, it's a leadership role, but not everyone necessarily leads projects or leads, solution. I don't know. Not necessarily in the project context. It can be someone just fixing problems and making things work. A clear example to me is Stan. Like, he doesn't necessarily have to lead. He doesn't lead project from start to finish. It's more like, okay, let's keep things moving smoothly. And I think that shows like that kind of leadership. It's just slightly different, I guess.
I think in the book you mentioned about, yeah, it's a leadership role doesn't necessarily mean you managing people in that way, but it is a leadership nonetheless, which, yeah, I find it, I agree with that.
I think one thing that stood out to me was some of the stuff about scope and how it kind of like illustrated being a staff engineer at sort of different levels. So like say within a team, within, I guess in our context, probably like a group or a stage, and then probably wider. And I guess sort of the difference between maybe like how hands-on you are at those different levels and how closely you're working with your manager. That might be, yeah.
One thing that struck me when I was going back to this blog post, because I had some in-depth conversations about people and what they thought that staff meant to them. And for some people, it was avoiding people altogether and just looking at long-term kind of subtle issues that people maybe don't notice because they're so subtle and very much cross-team. And there were some people who jump into broken masters and do the sort of incident response and all those, very fast-thinking things. And I think it very much depends on who you are. And I think people can have leadership, can show leadership in different ways, depending on their own skill set and what they notice and the best way that they work.
So it's not so much of what they do, but how they think about why they need to do certain things. Is it right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I remember talking to somebody who says, I'm not a fast thinker. So he never touched broken masters or incidents because I just can't think that fast. But he was very, very good at, hey, I noticed that this very low grade problem is there and that we can fix it by doing the following things. So he sort of tracked this one problem for months and then defined the problem, created an issue, broke it down, and then presented it as something technical debt or something kind of not directly impactful on customers, but still impactful, but that maybe it wasn't being noticed.
Charlie, let me ask you about that example you just gave, that the presentation or the issue that that person created, were they actually responsible for implementing it? And how, or if it wasn't them, did they manage to, you know, exert their influence, I guess, to get it implemented?
Yeah, so because product managers are ultimately responsible for engineers' time, he then has to make a business case for there to be engineering effort against it. So he then talked to the group, I think it was the group manager. This is a while ago. So it was something where he had to make a business case for there to be engineering resources put against it. And then I think it was eventually done, but it was the kind of thing where your leadership isn't just, hey, here's a problem, but also showing the business impact. And I think that's where the kind of tie-in with the business comes in, is because your opinion is taken very seriously in terms of, you know, because I mean, it's not just because of your rank, it's just because of you know, your experience and your skill set, and therefore you can make an argument for product managers to take into account, and some you know, things that maybe aren't features, but maybe it's something that's important to be done anyway. It's kind of like, should we do, you know, to get rid of technical tech, should we fix bugs, that sort of thing. So you'd be that's how your leadership would be asserted.
Thanks for the details. The reason I asked about that was because one of the things I think I struggle with is, you know, say you come up with some kind of thing that you think will provide a lot of productivity increase, or, you know, it'll help prevent broken masters, something like that. So you provide an issue with all the details, but then it just gets put into the backlog because maybe you don't bring it in front of the right people. Now you could just implement it yourself, you know, but that's the thing I struggle with, is like, at that point, where do you spend? Would it be better for you to spend your time just implementing it, or spend your time trying to you know, defend it, or try to come up with a reason to justify it?
And that's a good point, is what happens if it's not being, you know, what happens if it's not prioritized? And one of the other options is breaking it down. If it's something that you can swarm on, that's another option, is, you know, with things like pajamas migration. I've done pajamas migration. I'm not a front-end engineer. I shouldn't be anywhere near there. I don't know what I'm doing. But they made it so easy and so accessible for even someone like me to go in and make a small change. And those changes can add up. So if it's something that you can get people to swarm on, and if you get enough nerds excited about it, then it can still get done. And that can also show your own influence in, you know, getting nerd swarms going. And I've seen that with other initiatives as well, where it's not sidestepping product necessarily, but it's convincing people that this is a thing that should be worked on. And if you can break it down enough, make it small and accessible and easy and interesting for people to work on it, then that is definitely something that can be done as well. And that's just some problems it's not going to work with that, but for some things I've seen where you do get a swarm. I'm thinking of the test, was it test efficiency, where we increased how fast the tests were by changing let to let it be in backend tests, and it made the specs go so much faster. And it wasn't just one or two people working on it; it's heaps of MRs from people. And I think it was Jan Provaznik who did that, and he made it really easy and very straightforward to do that. And he had lots and lots of collaboration. So it shows that you can get people to collaborate with each other, and rather than spending your own time doing that, you can convince other people that it's important and make it very accessible for them to work on it. And so you're increasing your efficiency and collaboration that way.
I like that example of let it be versus let, because I'm not specifically a backend engineer, but that was something that was like easy to grasp. And I do end up writing a lot of aspect tests over time. So I think it's one of those nice examples where like doing the work of a small proof of concept, no doubt. I don't remember the full context of it, but I assume Jan probably wrote some tests, rewrote them using let it be, compared speed results or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
To kind of make the case for that, and then also providing a learning opportunity for others through doing the migration work themselves. Similar, like you were saying, Charlie, with the pajamas migrations, kind of brings more people into contact with what front end work might look like. Yeah, so I think the answer is probably somewhere along the lines of it's contextual, and you probably need to balance doing some sort of work to make the business case for it, as well as maybe not doing all the work. But yeah, it'll definitely be contextual.
I think as a staff and oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add on to that example of let it be, I think the other thing that I think Jan did was also to make that business case obvious by creating a dashboard that everyone can see. This is the impact of having slow tests. Like how much time are we wasting on this? And I think that made first they made the problem very obvious, and then second, it make it very clear how we prioritize where do we want to improve.
Some of my tests were at the top of that dashboard for a little while. Not fun to see.
Yeah, just wanted to add that one of the things that was really pointed out to me as being quite important is the higher you go, the more your time will be pulled on. And therefore, you have to be able to delegate where you can. And the better you are at communicating what to do and how in a really easy way, I think the more efficient you essentially are. And that's where your leadership comes in. Because if you just do everything yourself, you're going to use all of your time up. But if you can get other people and they learn and they can leverage that, I think it's a much higher level of your increasingly in demand time.
I'll just add my note here that this whole idea kind of falls into that category of there's like a list of the like non-technical human skills, I think, in the chapter, and one of them was like getting good at like framing things in a way so that other people care about it, and I think that actually came up during the earlier call about from the book club, and it's something that like I think a lot of the staff engineers at GitLab are quite good at, is finding ways to like make these cases. All right.
I actually have a question. So yeah, I have just recently started with GitLab, and then I found it actually I couldn't take like a lot of time to explore more things. But it seems like in order to become a staff engineer, so which means you need to have a bigger picture, and then you have to be familiar with other other things with other departments. So in that sense, which means you need to take a lot of time to explore things, to to get familiar with all the other functionalities in the app itself. So would that be something the staff engineer they have been doing for a while?
I feel like that's something that starts to happen over time. Like when you start, you're learning the ropes of your role, you're learning how to work with the team, and you don't really know or see how you can spend more time on other things. But once you get into like a good rhythm of working, you realize that okay, the team has priorities, and ideally the workload will be shared among everyone. So once you have a little bit of time, where as part of your career development or something like that, you start exploring options in other projects. And then I guess it depends on how you can adapt to that kind of work. But if you're feeling that you have too much work for your team, I would recommend talking to your manager and say, hey, I need some time as well to do some of my career development, because I'm very interested in moving forward in that way.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
I just wanted to add very quickly, even though Jaime just nailed it. But yeah, it's good to have domain familiarity, which I think does happen naturally as you spend more time here. There's been a couple of times when somebody in the dev department has said, hey, does anyone who wants to work on a thing, this thing? And I have said yes, and have absolutely not regretted it. I've just learned so much about learning this different part of it. So I've worked on anti-spam stuff, as well as plan stuff. I've worked on anti-spam stuff. I've worked on workspace stuff or the projecting groups, and as well as just other things that have just sort of popped up. And so I say yes to those things. And I think that in and of itself is career development, because you get a different view of different parts of the product and of the organization that just helps with that holistic view.
I don't know if this is right to say, but I don't think that it is a requirement to know a broad, to have a broad view across the entire product, because it's just too large. I think that depends on where the person is, what kind of, what group they are in, whether that group has interdependencies with other parts of the product that allows them to be exposed to that in that sense. But there are also, I think, product areas that are highly specialized. I think, for example, like Gitly would probably be a good example. Like, I don't think, and I'm not sure, maybe 80% of us don't even know like what happens within Gitly codebase. And perhaps people in Gitly the reverse would be the same. Like, engineers in Gitly might be specialized in that area, and they may not have the exposure to the rest of the product as well. But this is just my speculation.
I think you're absolutely right on that. I think it's impossible to know everything. Do you think that having a kind of cursory understanding of how it fits in is probably pretty important? Like, what is Gitly? What vaguely does it do? Kind of thing. But if you need to know, but I think it's also, how do I get this information? So if you're in an incident and it's like something's wrong with Gitly, okay, who can I ask that will actually know this? And you can shoulder tap them. So I think knowing the organization who has the skills you're looking for.
And in terms of like the progression at GitLab, I do think like one of the interesting things is, so I think when we first started adding the staff and beyond roles, like it's probably true that the people that first entered those roles did have a lot of domain knowledge and depth and experience. But I think like within the last year, we have started hiring people directly into the staff role. So they certainly would not have that domain knowledge, or at least not within the GitLab product. So I think that's true, very true, that it's not a requirement, but that there's the other skills involved.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in terms of like actually learning the skills as well, I think like Charlie's approach is definitely one way that works quite well. For me, I actually prefer some other methods. So I do like jumping into things like broken masters, often because you're then tying together like different pieces of the code base to solve a quite specific problem, as well as that being part of like wider efforts. So like, you know, the pajamas migrations and the aspect test migrations and things like that have helped me get a wider view of what's going on in different parts of the code base. I wouldn't say I'm completely well versed in a lot of the parts, but I have at least like a cursory understanding of like where to start, and I'm looking to solve a particular problem. Sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I think the recent hiring that we've done is for people who bring a particular set of skills, and who can be architects. I think the archetype was architect. So they have a single problem that they're working on, and they understand the business case because that's the single focus, but it's really their skill set that comes from outside that we want, and they'll get that domain familiarity. That will happen as their journey in GitLab continues. So I know that some people have sort of had question marks like, why are we hiring staff people when they're, staff engineers already in GitLab who could just get promoted? But I think that it's a different need of the business. So I just think I think the archetypes that they have in that first chapter somewhere was I think a really good way of understanding that staff is just not one thing. It's you bring different things to the table depending on who you are and what skills you have.
Yeah, thanks for this explanation, because that was I was about to ask the same question. So why are we hiring like staff engineering directly to the role? But it seems like so the domain expert knowledge is not necessary to be required. So depends on like what skill sets you have. Probably mostly the technical side, I guess.
Yeah, I would say if they've shown technical leadership in their previous organization, and they have specific skill set that we're after for a specific domain, maybe something we're exploring, or maybe, some problem that we want to solve for our organization, they'll hire for that. But it's very hard to get a job at GitLab. We're very fussy when we hire. So when someone is hired as staff, it's for a reason. So I trust that reasoning. And I think why not just what is good, but I think it also borders on privacy in terms of, I don't think anybody was like, well, I'm not going to join GitLab unless I'm a staff engineer. If they're like, well, we really, really want your skill set, so yes. But I think they also have to show that they would be good in this role because they have previous experience with technical leadership in their previous role. So I think they can have that lateral experience as well. This is conjecture on my part, by the way. So I don't know. Don't listen to me. It's a bad idea.
I was about to add something small, like, again, I'm in support engineering, and it's funny because, like, in our case, knowing a lot is actually kind of part of the job description to begin with, because we got tickets and we just deal with whatever came our way. So that was kind of like an interesting perspective in here, because for me, like looking at like all GitLab products, it's just like day-to-day job, right? But yeah, it's just interesting perspective here.
Well, we're a little bit over time here. I don't know if we wanted to jump over to Jaime's comment about that graph, because I do think that's a really interesting graph that talks a lot about, or it says a lot about scope and about, making decisions at a level beyond sort of, what you initially start out as an engineer. I don't know, Jaime, if you wanted to
yeah, like when I
that.
was reading this part, and I feel like it happens a lot, especially when you're new. Well, I found when you're new to a team or to the organization, you're so focused on what you need to deliver that you propose something, and then eventually someone comes, usually a senior plus staff level, would say, okay, yes, this is the big win, an easy win, but how about we do it this way that is going to fit better in the organization and with whatever else needs. And I don't know, I find it interesting because I've seen it happen many times, and I've been learning from that. And I think like over time I've been on the other side as well of proposing option B. So I feel like this graph just connected to me for some reason.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I also wanted to bring up this as well. And I think to me, I have been on both sides, like coming up with a local maximum solution and then also proposing something that fits better. I find that the latter, like doing B, happens a lot more when I'm doing like a maintainer review, for example, and that happens. And I feel that the challenge has been how do we propagate this knowledge to more people so that then we can help them save time without having to go through like multiple rounds of review and later on find out that, hey, there is a better way of doing it. Like I think the challenge is really about like how do we make that awareness happen earlier in the development process.
I'm just writing down a response. I may as well just say it. It's interesting to me how this kind of thing dovetails with iteration. And you'd think that iteration means that we just do like the easier thing, but it isn't. It means that we identify the better solution B and then we incrementally do it. And I worked in organizations where they're like, we don't need to do unit tests because that takes too much time, which I'm so glad that GitLab takes quality very seriously, and we look at the maintenance of what we produce, the cost of maintenance and because a lot of organizations do not do that. And so I'm grateful. Thanks for being wonderful, everyone.
Yeah, I actually want to add a few more things, because I found we may not necessarily to get to the solution B, because there are a couple of cases that we end up, for example, like solution C, and then solution C is actually not fixing the problem. So we need to like work on a solution D to improve it. So even after like a couple of reviews, we still need like more work to get it fixed. So iteration, to me, I think it means like things are being reviewed, and then people are getting like all sort of solutions, all sort of ideas, depending on their background knowledge and their technical skills. And then that may not lead us to a like perfect solution. We still need to find out and test it out. And then the whole process is actually like a complete circle that bring us to the end solution, not just like if the maintainer is going to give solution B, and then when we get the solution B done, and then we are done. It's not necessary like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I experience that quite often where like I have an idea and then I like refine it and come up with a better idea, and then only to find out that someone else adds a few little bits and pieces here and there that change the idea entirely, and then the next person comes in and does the same thing again and again. Which sometimes it can be frustrating when things keep changing, but then in the end you look back and realize that, you know, it was the right choice.
Yeah, the good thing I found is usually the product managers and EMs are also happy to support these ideas. So it's not necessarily like trying to fight with them in a sense that, okay, I want a result right now, versus, okay, I'm fine with this, let's schedule the following work as soon as possible so that we can get the better solution over time. And I feel like that just flows like GitLab, and I'm grateful that that happens.
I think it speaks very
Yeah.
well to the collaboration that we enjoy here.
Yeah, I think the attitude that we towards the issue, I think that is the thing I would like to appreciate in GitLab. So instead of like blaming blaming the problem or the issue that caused, and then people are just like focusing on getting the solution. So that actually helps a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we want to go into any of these other ones since we're a bit over time here. Maybe we can save some for next time and meet back next week for chapter 2. And as I mentioned, I may or may not come to most of these because they're a little late, but Jaime will certainly lead for the future.
Yeah, thanks for staying in late. I know it's late for you, so we appreciate your time.
No problem. I mean, I'm excited that this is all coming together and that so many people are interested. So thanks for coming, everyone, and have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you all next week.